Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by. I meant to be out last night with this, and of course it doesn't happen. You know, I'm often delayed for a number of reasons, so whenever I say I'm going to get something done by X date, always add some time to it. It invariably happens. In any case, insofar as the situation locally is concerned, and everything that's been going on the last week or so, and longer, there's nothing much to report except that the negotiations are underway. People are showing up, and groups within society are saying, we want to be part of this too. And the mesa, the table that is discussing this, is going to have to be a big table, because so many groups have come up and said, you can't talk about this without talking about us. And it's the way it has to be. And that's for them to decide. Everything is in their hands where it belongs. And as things come up that may have direct bearing on us or are really relevant to what is being some other subject of importance here, otherwise I'm not going to be a news source for that. You can use local papers. I'll give you URLs, or that is web addresses where you can go and see them, and you can Google or translate them for you or whatever, if that's what you want. But the key point is that here we aren't going to do that. I had a mass of, some of it very ugly emails started coming in the early stages, and I just stopped at one point, just stopped and said, no, not going to go on with this. This channel is not dedicated to that. People were, some of the stuff that came in you wouldn't believe. It's reported, and always hope for the best. I don't hope to never see those folks again. But there are others that were reasonable and so on, but the point, it got out of hand. So I just sort of stepped back and said, let it go, and then came back Sunday evening to basically say, this is how I feel, and this is how I will look at things, and that's what I'm doing now. So I hope that you'll understand that. You're welcome to comment and so on, and I will respond. I've just sort of been quiet the last couple of days because I've been very busy, but you can certainly do that. But try to remember always to be civil and not focus on what they should be doing, what have you. Try to stay out of the topic, basically, unless it's really important to you to have something to say. But if it's in any way abusive or insulting, and I don't mean just Panama, I mean everybody, anybody, out it goes. It's too much of the stuff going on all over the internet. There's so many places to go for that sort of stuff. This is not one of them. Sorry. And much though I may, I get some really good comments every once in a while, and then the last two sentences they go and slam somebody or some group or some, religion or whatever. And I can't change it. It's their message. I can't edit it. So I have to turn it down. So try to keep that in mind. But just keep being positive here and moving forward. That's what's important. Okay. Now today, I wanted to talk, and in days to come, I want to talk about some of the factors that an analyst looks at when they look at situations between countries and among nations and what have you. What are they looking for? What are the differences and so on? And how have they changed from past generations and la-di-da-di-da? So they don't always occur to us. We may be well aware that they are true. It may not be the least bit surprised to hear that they are, but we haven't really made the connection how it affects us. So I want to start that today. It's been such a busy afternoon. I keep getting interrupted. I don't know if I'll get this out tonight or not, but if otherwise, it'll be out tomorrow morning. One of the factors that we have to take into account when we're looking at societies is the age distribution. Now, that has never been such an issue as it has been in this last, say, 50 years or so, and what it boils down to is something called the baby boom. No need to go into that. You all are aware of it. But it's predominantly found, of course, among nations that were in World War II, lost a lot of lives, had a lot of destruction, and at various times they began to recover. Young men and women got together, married, had children, and so forth, that had been putting it off or simply incapable of doing it, not allowed to, and so on, for a while, for several years. And it just built up a great need for children. And we had them, they had them, and it was a rather amazing phenomenon, and I don't think people were prepared for it. In fact, they weren't, if you follow the history of it, until after they were into it 6, 7, 8 years. But it started at different times, and it went on for different times, and so on. So, but it's a general issue. This is what makes a major difference today. Many years later, is this bulge in the population of some nations is now up at retirement age, as it is in the U.S., Canada, and much of Europe. And it will make a very substantial difference when it's compared to a nation like Panama, which was not directly involved in the hostilities in World War II and didn't have the damage that came from that. So let's take a look and see what impact that might have had. Now, these statistics I've got will be pulled from 2020. You can find different stats, particularly on average age, so on. But fundamentally, the stats are similar to those found in any number of statistical handbooks, and they do change and so on, but they change slowly. The little details aren't important here. It's the major thrust. You'll get the message really fast. Let's take a look at it. Okay. There we go. As you can see, Panama is at the bottom here, but it's actually at a mid-level for the world as a whole. We're around 9% of our population is 65 or over, and the average age is around 30. Likewise, the world's just a bit above that. But once you get into the nations that had a substantial World War II baby booms and weren't complicated as China's was by a one person per family, one child per family rule, you see they are very different, ranging from around 17% in the United States to around 23% in Germany. Likewise, the average age is a little bit different from one country to the next, but you can see it makes a substantial difference overall from 30 into the 40s, and really the high 40s in some instances. So what does it really mean, and what do we need to think about when we see something like this that historically has been a very unusual thing to see? Okay, well, I'll tell you, I sort of sum it up in one way, and simply put, I look at people like yourself, for example, and I say, the average Panamanian who's 30 years old today, at the turn of the century, was 8. How old were you? I was 55. I was almost 7 times, 1 year short of 7 times as old as that 8-year-old here in Panama, who today I may deal with in business or at the store or whatever, who's 30 years old and has a family of his own, or her own. So it makes a rather substantial difference, doesn't it? And we see ourselves, particularly those of us who are retirees. I'm not a retiree, of course, but I mean, many are still working and doing things, but I mean, our age group, retirement age, I think that's the way to put it. We are way older than people here. Many studies in many different cultures will indicate that the oldest generation tends to play a role of putting the foot on the brakes every once in a while, saying, don't go so fast, slow down, you're losing things, we're frightened, we're a little scared, we don't see what's coming, we don't know whether you're ready for this, and on and on. They tend to be cautious and trying to slow things down, where the younger generation would be much more likely to come in and push and say, we want something, we want to change this, we don't see any reason for that policy over there, we're tired of that, we want something new, and we're very excited by the stuff that's coming down the road, the stuff that scares you excites us, and so forth. It's the middle group that plays a very critical role here, in that they not only tend to be the most productive in providing wealth that allows the support of the entire society, but they are also typically in charge. And their job, among other things, is to use a little bit of this caution from the older people and a little bit of this enthusiasm for change from the younger generation and sort of weld them together with the practical view for the people earning the money to make it all work. And when that can happen, it's very, very, very useful. But when things get out of whack and there's an imbalance, And then you've got one end of the barbell, so to speak, is heavier than it normally is, the other much lighter. That leads to making things volatile and unstable. Now, in Panama, they're pretty stable. I mean, the population breakdown here is a traditional population breakdown. Their pyramid, as they say, is not as steep as it would have been 50 years ago, but everyone's having a slowing down in terms of birth rates and whatever. So it's just as normal as it can be. I'm not going to go through all the pyramids out there, but I can tell you they look really strange, and they're very different than Panama's. So we may misunderstand. We may think we may be frightened. We may not like what changes are coming here. We get the feeling that something awful is happening, when in fact all it is a relatively younger nation coming to grips with reality, and a middle-aged group fighting to keep everything pulled together, and among themselves as well as among age groups. So it's a very different dynamic. I look at this less from the viewpoint of Panama as I do from the viewpoint of Russia, China, Europe, and North America. Those four, which are to me, they're all frightened. And maybe very justifiably so, but there's a lot of fear there. They're older. They're all older. Russia's got a declining population, and it's seriously got a problem over there. China's one-child per family rule actually is leading them in the situation. Japan has that, but so do other nations in the Northern Hemisphere, and of course, obviously, U.S., Canada, and Europe. So these nations are at this stage. They were often referred to as the first, or at least the second, or first world nations, or the ones who wanted to be the leaders. They were the leaders or the wannabe leaders, so to speak. And today, they're not leading so much as they are seemingly trying to go backwards, trying to reach back into the past, because they don't like what they see, and it makes them nervous, and they're losing their faith in anything and everything, and so they're dividing up and going different ways. I think that's a reflection, basically, in part, by my own generation. And not because we meant to do anything wrong, it's just there's so many of us that it's hard when you're outnumbered by older people, and you stand up and say, I want to see a change, and they say, sit down, we'll talk to you later. We don't have the normal development. And so the nations that will succeed, and I've always said this, and I said it from the very beginning when I got involved with the work and I saw things and I started visiting many nations, is that those that can adapt to change have the future. They're going to create it. And those that cannot adapt to change aren't. They're not going to have it. They're going to have to follow the ones that do. And because you can't get behind very far in this world for very long before it gets very difficult to catch up again. And this is one big concern I have. Latin America as a whole needs to move up very definitely. Panama has made a great deal of progress. We need to make more. And I'm hoping that that's for them to decide. But I'm really hoping we can find this way into progress, which involves less corruption, among other things, But the thrust should be on this whole adapting to this new 21st century. We're in the third decade, for heaven's sakes. We've got to start dealing with it effectively on its own terms, because the fourth decade is coming down on us strong enough. So it is that these are concerned, and these other groups of nations are very much a concern to analysis right at the moment. Their comparison to countries like Panama indicates to me that the future lies in part to those smaller nations, and moderate, some of them aren't so small. Indonesia's not small, but its average age is about the same level, and so on. It has certain things that might make it successful, despite being very large, and maybe that's very hard. On thousands of islands, 275 million people, you're wide open to all sorts of difficulties, but they got a shot at it. But the nations you don't hear of very often, and the universities today are spread all over the planet Earth, and they're well-qualified people teaching in them. They're well-equipped. This is never the case when we grew up. So progress can come from any quarter. And you go to the National University of Singapore, and you're really at a very, very good institution, and you're going to learn a lot, or you're not going to stay there very long. It's true in many other areas as well. So That's the human race. That's the planet growing. Panama is growing too. We need to grow, and you out there who are thinking of coming down, you're the kind of people who grow. Now, you may be leaving people behind who just don't want to grow. Okay, it's all right. They'll take care of themselves. They always have. If you do come down, you have a chance to disconnect from any of this pessimism, this negativity that is weighing down on everyone's shoulders all the time. And you can, in your own lives, take a different stance. Just be more positive and looking for things you can do and learn. It can make all the difference in the world. It can, in opening up your own life, it will have such an impact on everybody around you, and you'll find that you adapt and you'll get along just fine. And whatever you go to, whether it's Panama or any other society, you have a much better chance of having a useful, productive, and fun time. But keep that in mind. We have this age thing that's going on in the planet right now. Well, that too shall pass someday, but not yet. In any event, as a representative of the older section of that group, I'm on my way. I look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future. And by golly, I think I've got this video done.